Well, first of all, we launched this week the Amazon initiative inside the Concordia Summit, which is an instrument to convey private sector, public sector leaders in order to protect the Amazon. And how do we do it? So we're promoting that we create a major world awareness. The second thing is to create aggregated value chains with local communities and indigenous communities. So instead of having the incentive to destruct the Amazon, they are getting paid through environmental services in order to create a market of their products with international buyers. The third element is to use georeferential technology to fight illegal mining, among other environmental crimes. And I think also something that is very important is to promote the private sector investment in natural conservated areas. So I think with that initiative, we're going to get a major mobilization of resources and trying to put together this private and public coalition. But also I've been participating in events where we talk about the promotion of democracy and the defense of democracy in Latin America. And something that is also very important, how do we ensure that we are prepared for major healthcare challenges in the years to come? So I've been working in all these matters, and I'm delighted that we have seen a very important response from the U.S. audience. Well, if you see, when I was president, I have a holistic view on how to face the challenges derived from illegal drugs. And that's why we basically stopped the exponential growth of illegal crops in Colombia. That's why we reached the highest seizures ever. Last year, there were more than 670 tons that were seized by the Colombian authorities. But also, we fought the criminals, we fought the kingpins, and we were able to capture and extradite the most dangerous drug dealer in the world, who was so badly called Otoniel. And that demonstrated the commitment that we had as a government. But also we promoted healthcare policies to treat the people in addiction. And also we created police policies in the cities in order to stop the sale of illegal drugs in the streets. So we had that holistic approach. Now, what worries me is that there's now maybe the possibility of getting into the permission or the legalization of cocaine consumption. I think that will be very bad for Colombia, and that will be very bad for the countries in the hemisphere. And I think that could generate also a major security threat to the United States. So by no means I'm in favor of the legalization of the cocaine trade, but I also have to say it, Colombia cannot turn into a narco state. I think the world now has unified in the concept of prohibition. And I think if just one country, let's say Colombia, decides to legalize cocaine, it'll turn itself into a narco state. But I also believe, as I said it while being president, that we need to put an end to some hypocrisy, because we do face in Colombia major threats because of drugs, and we had a policy where we fought decisively all the supply of cocaine. But on the demand side, I think more than just the security efforts, more needs to be done in the countries where the consumption of cocaine has spiked. And maybe the best way to do it is also to promote policies and messaging and campaigns so that people are conscient enough about the damages that the cocaine trade generates, including the environmental damage, where in order to plant 1 hectare of coca, almost 3 hectares of tropical jungle are destroyed. Or even that in order to produce 1 kilogram of cocaine, there are dozens of gallons of gasoline that are used. So I think having the conscience, the environmental conscience about the damage that the cocaine produces to the environment, but also the damage that this creates to society, those are things that are needed. But by no means I am in favor of the legalization approach, and I'm not in favor that Colombia turns itself into a narco state. Well, first of all, I have to say that I am glad that there is continuity, at least in the messaging of the policies that we developed throughout my administration, because we made Colombia a leader in the energy transition in Latin America. When my administration began, we had barely 0.2% of our energy matrix in non-conventional renewables, and now we're heading fast in order to reach 14% and later on 20%, which means that we're going to become the leaders in non-conventional renewable energies in the region. But I also believe there has to be a balance, because Colombia is a producer of oil and gas. And Colombia is an exporter of oil and gas. 40% or more than 40% of our exports are oil and gas. And those resources that we get out of the exports and the resources we get out of the taxation from this sector and the foreign direct investment that is in this sector is crucial for us to have the resources to increase social investment in the country. And I think there has to be a balance. So there's a transition going on, and Colombia can turn itself in the next decade into an exporter of green hydrogen. But so far, we need to keep the balance of doing a good job when it comes to oil and gas in terms of exports and production. And at the same time, we need to keep on expanding non-conventional renewable energies. Something that we also promoted in my administration was clean mobility. And during my term, Colombia became the country in Latin America with the largest cargo fleet run by electric vehicles and the largest public transportation fleet run by electric vehicles. So that means that we were reducing the footprint on the car park inside the country, but at the same time, we were turning Ecopetrol into the number one auto generator with non-conventional renewable energy. So I believe there has to be a balance, and this is not a matter of black and white. I think we have to continue becoming leaders in the energy transition with non-conventional renewable energies, but we need to keep also the conventional energy that is a source of funding for the social programs that we have in Colombia. Well, I believe that we still have to do much better in trying to raise resources that can accelerate the energy transition in the world. What worries me is that today we're facing a worldwide inflation. So if you keep on increasing the cost of fuels at this moment in time, where there's a spike in inflation, and where there is a logistical shortage in some parts of the world, and we're facing this horrendous genocide that is taking place in Ukraine by the attacks of Russia that is also hurting the supplies of many goods, I think we can put an additional pressure to inflation. I believe that it has to be a sound balance in generating resources to accelerate the energy transition. I also believe that the world needs to keep on reducing the carbon footprint and to start reducing its dependency on fossil fuels, but it has to be done in a progressive and sustainable way. That has always been my approach, and that's why I believe that this transition has to take place, but we cannot demonize the sectors that are needed today for energy independence and also for energy security. I've always said that ELN is a terrorist group, and when I was president, I introduced a constitutional reform so that neither narco-trafficking nor kidnapping could be connected to political crimes in order to be granted with amnesty. That was one of the most important reforms we made during our administration, and I think we have to persevere on that reform. And I also believe that what you cannot do is to have bilateral ceasefire, because there's a difference between the legitimate authority of police and the army, who are the protectors of the Constitution, and the criminals who are threatening the lives, the goods, and the rights of the people. So I think there has to be kept a military pressure, and any opportunity of peace dialogues has to be based that there has to be a stop immediately in all the criminal activities, and all the people that are kidnapped by the organizations need to be released. If that is not followed, I think those terrorist groups will use all their possibilities of pressure to try to legitimize their crimes by also blackmailing the government in their willingness of entering into a peace process.